Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave.
On behalf of every father and every mother.
Wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors.
And paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a good broadcast for you today. It's a little short but sweet. We actually were working on an interview for today. However, the guest said it would be a more convenient time to do it on Wednesday. So keep an eye out if you're tuned in now, or I guess on the VOD. Keep an eye out this coming Wednesday for an interview that we're going to do. Should be fun. I'll leave it there just because there have been many times in our broadcasting career where we've said, oh, we're going to get this person on, and it eventually doesn't work out. But pretty sure on Wednesday we'll have a nice little interview for you. We'll make it a surprise until we promote it. This week today I should say, we'll just be doing the news. I'll be presenting the news as I always do. That'll be followed by Germany to Ukraine, and then we'll maybe last week we didn't really get time to get to the Q&A, which we felt a little bad about. There's just a lot. Well, we got some of it done, but there's a lot of questions from chat. Chat was real lively, and we kind of shorthanded them with the Q&A. So we'll try to give you guys like a longer Q&A this week if you so desire. That's pretty much it for this week. So without any further delay, I will jump into the news. These are the main headlines for the week of November 24th, 2024. In the temporarily occupied city of Berdyansk, located in Zaporizhia, a significant explosion occurred late in the evening, targeting the port area. Ukrainian officials have attributed this incident to an attack on port infrastructure. According to information shared by the Berdyansk City Military Administration, the explosion took place at approximately 11:40 p.m. on November 22nd. Local residents reported hearing a loud noise originating near the port. An advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, Petro Andrushenko, commented on the incident, hinting at a confirmed strike on the port and suggesting damage to the targeted area. This is not the first such incident in Berdyansk. On October 31st, explosions reportedly caused by a drone strike also struck the port in the occupied region. Explosions followed by a fire have occurred at a key arsenal belonging to the Main Missile and Artillery Directorate of Russia's Ministry of Defense in the town of Karachev, located in Bryansk. Ukrainian officials and local Russian authorities have provided varying accounts. According to Andrei Kovalenko, who leads Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation, the arsenal was struck and contained a significant stockpile of weaponry. This included artillery shells, ammunition for multiple launch rocket systems, North Korean-sourced artillery, guided aerial bombs, and anti-aircraft missiles. The method of attack was not specified, although Kovalenko mentioned that drones were used to attack the facility in the past. The governor of Bryansk Oblast, Alexander Bogomaz, acknowledged the incident, attributing it to a drone attack. He claimed that air defenses successfully intercepted the drones, resulting in no casualties or damage, although these assertions are unverified. Despite the statements, a video of the explosion was widely circulated on social media. Kovalenko also mentioned that Ukraine struck key facilities in Russia, including a plant in Belgorod Oblast that covertly produces cargo drones for military purposes, and a weapons arsenal in Novgorod. On November 21st, Norwegian authorities arrested a security guard employed at the U.S. Embassy in Oslo on suspicion of espionage for Russia and Iran. The individual, a man in his 20s, is accused of compromising national security through his intelligence activities. He is admitted to collecting and sharing information with Russian and Iranian authorities, but denies the espionage charges. The suspect is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in security and preparedness at Norway's Arctic University. This incident marks the second espionage-related case at UIT, or the Arctic University, in recent years. In 2022, a guest researcher at the university, initially identified as a Brazilian named José Assis Guimarães, was arrested on espionage allegations and later revealed to be a Russian national named Mikhail Valerievich Mikushin. Norway shares a 198-kilometer border with Russia and has implemented stricter entry regulations for Russian nationals since the full-scale invasion in February 2022. In September, the Norwegian government considered constructing a fence along all or part of its border with Russia to enhance security. As of the morning of November 23, 2024, 6 Russian ships equipped with Caliber cruise missiles are stationed in the Black Sea. These vessels are part of a larger group of 20 Russian ships in the area, with a total launch capacity of up to 23 Caliber missiles. The Sea of Azov currently has no Russian naval presence. South Korea's top security advisor, Shin Won-sik, stated on November 22nd that Moscow has reportedly provided North Korea with air defense systems, including anti-air missiles, in exchange for military support in the Kursk region of Russia. According to Shin, this arrangement also includes various forms of economic aid and promises of Russian assistance to Pyongyang in satellite technology. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced plans to continue testing an experimental intermediate-range ballistic missile after its use in a strike on Ukrainian territory in Dnipro, sparking condemnation from Ukraine and many allies. Speaking at a defense conference on Friday, Putin defended the tests, emphasizing that Russia has a sufficient stock of the missile for further testing in combat conditions, quote, and is preparing for serial production. The missile is reportedly a modified RS-26 Rubezh intercontinental ballistic missile, is nuclear capable and capable of striking targets across Europe, according to Sergei Karakayev, Russia's Strategic Missile Forces commander. President Zelensky criticized Russia's use of Ukraine as a testing ground for such weapons and urged global condemnation, including from nations in the global south. He also called for urgent consultations with Ukraine's allies to secure enhanced air defense systems to counter the new threat. NATO and Ukraine are set to hold emergency talks on Tuesday to address the situation, which Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk described as a dramatic and decisive phase of the conflict. Ukraine's parliament canceled a session following the strike, tightening security measures in response. The missile, referred to by the Russian military as Oreshnik, or Hazel, has raised international concerns. While U.S. officials downplay the missile as a, quote, game changer, they have criticized its nuclear capabilities and Russia's continued escalation in the war. Meanwhile, Zelensky called on countries like China and Brazil, which have proposed a joint peace plan, to actively condemn Moscow's actions, arguing that diplomatic gestures without consequences embolden Russia to continue their assaults. The armed forces of Ukraine have established their first school dedicated to training operators of unmanned ground robotic systems, as reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The program is already underway and focuses on preparing personnel to operate various types of robotic systems, including those for logistics, specialized tasks, and engineering applications. The initiative involves training operators on approximately 10 different types of ground-based unmanned systems. Efforts are ongoing to expand and enhance the program to improve training efficiency and develop robust educational infrastructure. The training program also includes a structured curriculum aligned with specific military specialties. To ensure high-quality instruction, specialized software has been developed and training samples of robotic systems are utilized. The program emphasizes both theoretical knowledge and hands-on practical skills, ensuring that the trainees are fully prepared for operational scenarios. The training duration for the system crews has been planned to ensure a comprehensive preparation. The head of the Innovation Activity Department highlighted the importance of adopting forward-looking approaches to military development, stating that integrating innovative solutions like the school are a critical step to enhancing the capabilities of Ukraine's armed forces. Up next, we have economic news. The Biden administration has formally notified Congress of its intent to cancel half of Ukraine's $4.6 billion in debt incurred from economic assistance, according to a statement by State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller during a Wednesday briefing. This decision aligns with the provisions in earlier legislation that grant the president authority to forgive portions of the loan. Miller explained that Congress has the option to challenge the decision through a resolution of objection. However, he expressed confidence that such objection is unlikely, citing strong bipartisan support in Congress for aid to Ukraine. The loan cancellation stems from a broader supplemental spending bill passed in April, which allocated $95 billion in funding, including $61 billion for Ukraine. As part of the package, $10 billion was designated as economic aid to Kyiv directly, structured as a conditional loan. The bill empowered President Biden to cancel up to half of this loan starting on November 15, 2024, with the remaining eligible for cancellation by the next president, January 1, 2026. The United Nations Development Program, in collaboration with the Japanese government, has provided critical energy equipment to Kharkiv and Odessa to support their essential infrastructure amidst continued Russian attacks targeting Ukraine's energy systems. The announcement was made by Ukraine's Ministry of Energy. Kharkiv received 15 variable frequency drives and a gas turbine, both vital for maintaining the infrastructure. In Odessa, 2 advanced gas piston cogeneration units will be installed, complementing 2 previously delivered units. Together, these systems are expected to fulfill approximately 50% of the energy requirements for the city's critical infrastructure, ensuring the operation of water supplies, heating, and sewage systems. With the assistance of the Japan International Cooperation Agency, 32 water generators will be delivered to further bolster infrastructure in the affected regions. Ukraine and Italy are set to enhance their collaboration in the supply of critical raw materials, focusing on strengthening value chains, advancing research and innovation, and conducting comprehensive mapping and exploration activities. This initiative was highlighted by Ukraine's first Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy, Yulia Sverdenko, during the Ukraine-Italy Business Forum in Rome. A key aspect of the partnership involves potential cooperation between Italy's Institute for Environmental Protection and Research and Ukraine's State Service of Geology and Subsoil. This collaboration aims to promote safe and sustainable practices within the value chains of critical raw materials, as well as expanding commercial and investment opportunities. Sverdenko emphasized that attracting investment and fostering innovation in the critical raw materials sector is a priority for Ukraine, and that cooperation with Italy will help achieve the objectives. The Croatian Ministry of Defense has announced the transfer of 30 M84 tanks and 30 M80 infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine, with a total estimated value of nearly 145 million euros. This valuation includes spare parts and ammunition, as detailed by the Croatian defense minister. This marks the first time M84 tanks, a Yugoslav-built adaptation of the Soviet T-72 M1, will be supplied to Ukraine. These tanks were initially manufactured under license in Yugoslavia and later updated to the M84A Snapshire standard by Croatia. The modernization enhanced the tank's firepower through a DBR-84 ballistic computer and an advanced day-night infrared sight system for the gunner. The tanks were also equipped with a more powerful 1,000 horsepower V46TK diesel engine and improved turret and gun guidance systems. However, their armor protection remains at the level of the original T-72M1, T-72A, as they lack dynamic or additional armor packages. The M80 IFVs, developed in Yugoslavia in the 1970s, are often mistakenly associated with the Soviet BMP-2, but are in fact distinct vehicles. They feature a German-licensed Daimler-Benz engine delivering 320 horsepower and are armed with a 20mm Hispano-Suiza HS-804 automatic gun capable of firing 1,000 rounds per minute. In exchange for this military assistance, Croatia will receive financial support from Germany to purchase modern Leopard 2A8 tanks, further bolstering their own defense capabilities. Ukraine has secured a $4.8 billion loan agreement with the World Bank to support priority budgetary needs, according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Finance. The agreement was signed on November 22nd by the Finance Minister Serhiy Marchenko and the World Bank's Eastern Europe Operations Manager Kevin Tomlinson, under the framework of the Public Expenditures for Administrative Capacity Endurance, or PEACE project. The funding, facilitated by contributions from the United States and other international partners, is directed at alleviating the economic strain caused by Russia's ongoing full-scale invasion. The U.S. contribution is coordinated through USAID in collaboration with the Department of Treasury and State, ensuring funds are delivered to Ukraine's state budget. The loan will be utilized for critical expenditures, including pensions for elderly citizens, financial assistance for internally displaced persons, and salaries for key workers such as teachers, first responders, and emergency service personnel. During a visit to Sweden, Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov secured an agreement with his Swedish counterpart, Pal Johnson, for Sweden to fund the production of Ukrainian-made long-range drones. The agreement follows the so-called Danish model, where foreign governments directly finance military production for Ukraine's defense needs. The agreement involves Sweden purchasing drones specifically for the Ukrainian armed forces, a step Umerov described as a demonstration of trust in Ukraine's defense industry. The ministers also discussed plans to finance additional military aid for 2025, with an emphasis on equipping Ukrainian forces with advanced military hardware. Negotiations on this aspect of cooperation are reportedly nearing their conclusion. Umerov also met with representatives of Swedish defense companies to explore collaborative projects. Discussions included potential production of military equipment, artillery, optics, guidance systems, communications technology, and air defense systems. A key focus is on localizing production within Ukraine, forming joint ventures, increasing production volumes, and acquiring advanced weaponry and technologies. The International Monetary Fund released a statement emphasizing Ukraine's reliability as a borrower and its strong debt repayment strategy, framing financial support to Ukraine as both a moral and economic imperative for its international partners. The IMF's representative to Ukraine, Priscilla Tofano, underscored that providing funding now is significantly more cost-effective for Western allies than addressing the potential economic and social fallout of a Ukrainian defeat, which would include increased defense budgets and refugee-related expenses. Tofano acknowledged Ukraine's efforts to boost domestic revenue generation, but highlighted the profound economic shock caused by Russia's aggression. External funding, such as the G7's $50 billion initiative under the Accelerating Emergency Revenue Arrangements, or ERA for Ukraine, remains essential to stabilize the country. This funding is drawn from frozen Russian assets, providing critical support to Ukraine's war efforts. Looking ahead, Tofano stressed the need for Ukraine to prepare for the post-war period, which will bring substantial financial demands, including reconstruction, social programs for veterans, and incentives to encourage displaced citizens to return. The IMF has proposed several strategies to ensure fiscal sustainability, including raising taxes, particularly value-added tax, improving expenditure planning, and aligning policies with Ukraine's EU accession goals. The IMF also noted the importance of structuring a long-term fiscal strategy with plans such as the 2026-2028 budget declaration to address rising costs both during and after the war. While restructuring external debt is on the table, equity financing is seen as less favorable. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, during a visit to Kyiv on November 19th, announced a €130 million investment in Ukraine's defense industry. Frederiksen highlighted that Ukraine's wartime experience provides invaluable lessons for other European nations. She expressed interest in facilitating visits from European industrial sectors, including Denmark's, to Ukraine to gain insights into their ability to expand and modernize production lines under wartime conditions. The European Union has expanded its legal framework for imposing sanctions on individuals and entities linked to the supply of Iranian weapons to Russia for their war in Ukraine. This includes new measures targeting the transfer of Iranian-made missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, and related technologies. 1 individual and 4 shipping companies have been added to the sanctions list. The updated measures prohibit the export or sale of components from the EU to Iran that could be used in developing missiles and UAVs. The EU has also introduced a transaction ban restricting interactions with ports, locks, and vessels involved in transferring Iranian weapons or related components to Russia. Key facilities impacted include Iranian ports such as Amirabad and Anzali, except in cases requiring maritime safety, humanitarian aid, or emergencies. Among those newly sanctioned are the Islamic Republic of Iran shipping lines and its director, Mohammad Reza Khiabani, due to their role in transporting drones for Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. Also listed are 3 Russian shipping companies, MG Flot, VTS Broker, and Arapax, whose vessels have facilitated the transfer of Iranian-made weapons across the Caspian Sea to resupply forces in Ukraine. Russia is introducing a draft law offering loan debt relief for up to 10 million rubles, approximately $100,000 to individuals who enlist in the military as part of efforts to boost recruitment for the war. According to the Moscow Times, the State Duma is set to consider the proposal on November 19th, following its approval in the first reading on October 29th. The law applies to debts associated with court orders or enforcement proceedings initiated before December 1st, 2024, and offers loan forgiveness to both veterans and their families. The measure also proposes extending the grace period for suspected borrower obligations to 180 days after military service from the originally proposed 30 days. The initiative is part of a significant rise in debt enforcement cases in Russia. In the first 9 months of 2024, lenders pursued the recovery of 141 trillion rubles or $14.1 billion US dollars, a 34% increase compared to the same period in 2023. During this time, 10.9 million new enforcement proceedings were initiated, an 11% increase, bringing the total active cases against individuals to 24 million, valued at 3.37 trillion rubles or $33 billion. And last up, we have international relations. The parliament of Georgia's breakaway region of Abkhazia has approved the resignation of its Russia-backed president Aslan Zhanya following days of anti-government unrest in Sukhumi. Zhanya announced his resignation as part of an agreement reached with opposition forces, which also called for the resignation of the prime minister and the evacuation of protesters from occupied government buildings. Vice President Badre Gunba will lead an interim government until a new presidential election is held, although a date has not yet been set. The unrest began on October 11th after the detention of 5 activists opposing a proposed investment treaty with Russia. Although their release briefly calmed tensions, protests resumed on October 17th when the Abkhaz parliament considered ratifying a controversial agreement with Moscow that offered significant tax and custom exemptions to Russian investors. Protesters clashed with law enforcement, stormed government buildings, and demanded Zhanya's resignation. The protests are part of widespread discontent with Russian influence in Abkhazia, particularly regarding proposals to allow foreign ownership of local property. Critics argue that these measures, including the previously withdrawn apartments bill, would disproportionately benefit Russian oligarchs and erode Abkhazia's autonomy. Concerns about being swallowed by Russian presence have fueled opposition to the policies. The Russian-Abkhazian agreement has been a focal point of contention. Advocates, including Zhanya, argue that it would attract investment and boost the region's economy. However, opponents view it as a step towards greater Russian control. Russia's foreign ministry condemned the protests, warning that the instability in Abkhazia could deter foreign investment and harm its socio-economic development. Russian tourism to Abkhazia is a key economic driver of their economy and has already been impacted, with hundreds of cancellations reported following the unrest. With its subtropical climate and proximity to Russia, it's a popular destination for Russian tourists who comprise the bulk of its visitors. In 2024, 1.4 million Russians traveled to the region, with projections of 1.6 million in 2025. However, the political instability has led many to reconsider their travel plans. Dimitri Shapovalov, a man who staged a political protest by climbing a billboard in Moscow and displaying a banner reading, "Putin, where are you, bitch? Make room for me," has been sentenced to 15 days in jail. The sentence was issued on charges of disobeying police orders, according to RTVI. The court ruling states that Shapovalov ignored repeated requests from police officers to descend from the billboard. Despite his initial refusal, he eventually did climb down after spending over 2 hours in the cold weather. Police reports claim he resisted and obstructed officers, although Shapovalov denied resisting and explained his actions were a political statement. He reportedly admitted guilt, emphasizing that his protest was intended to express his political views. His demonstration garnered attention before police and emergency services arrived on the scene. The Euromaidan protests, which began this week on November 21st in 2013, marked a turning point in Ukraine's modern history, catalyzing their transformation towards democracy, national identity, and independence from Russian influence. Sparked by then-President Viktor Yanukovych's decision to abandon Ukraine's EU integration in favor of closer ties with Russia, the protests grew into a nationwide movement known as the Revolution of Dignity. Euromaidan began with university students gathering at Kyiv's central Maidan Square to demand European integration and protest at Yanukovych's pro-Russian policies. The movement quickly gained momentum after security forces violently dispersed the peaceful protesters. News of children being beaten by police mobilized Ukrainians across the country, uniting citizens around ideals of dignity, human rights, and national sovereignty. The protests evolved beyond foreign policy issues, reflecting widespread frustration with corruption, economic stagnation, and repression. The movement drew strength from a growing middle class, cultural elites, and a civil society determined to break free from Ukraine's post-Soviet malaise. Euromaidan was a largely self-organized and horizontal movement. Protesters created an infrastructure of support, including field kitchens, medical stations, and even a, quote, Maidan University, where participants discussed Ukraine's future. The defensive core of the movement, called the Self-Defense of Maidan, played a crucial role in protecting protesters from riot police. This group was initially armed with makeshift shields and helmets, but grew more organized with support from sympathetic former security professionals. Protests spread to cities across Ukraine, with regional demonstrations strategically disrupting local police deployments and amplifying pressure on the government. The movement reached its peak in February 2014 when government snipers killed dozens of protesters on Institutska Street. This violence, intended to crush the revolution, only intensified resolve among the protesters. Leaders like Volodymyr Parasiuk openly rejected compromises, threatening to escalate if Yanukovych refused to resign. Faced with growing resistance and a collapsing support base, Yanukovych fled Ukraine on February 22, 2014. And that wraps up the major news items for this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Yeah, and that should be me. Hello, guys. As always, I will now present the most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. This week, I actually got a little bit more to report, so my segment will be a bit longer. Starting with Monday, the German city of Dortmund has donated a fully functional sewer cleaning vehicle that is urgently needed for infrastructure maintenance to its Ukrainian twin city of Zhytomyr. On the same day, on the sidelines of an Ukraine conference of long-term support and reconstruction in Ukraine, the German federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia has handed over 6 fire brigade and police vehicles to Serhiy Lysak, sorry if I butchered that name, the governor of the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. The German city of Bonn handed over 4 personal transport vehicles to the from the Bonn Fire Brigade to the German-Ukrainian organization Blau-Gelbes Kreuz e.V. on Tuesday, which will transport the donated vehicle to Bonn's Ukrainian twin city, Kherson. The German government has updated their website on military assistance for Ukraine on Wednesday. In the past 5 weeks, Germany has delivered the following military assistance to Ukraine: 60 Golden Eagle UAVs, 12 Hornet XR UAVs, 100 RQ-35 Hydron UAVs, 20 Vector UAVs, 2 VT-4 Rochen UAVs, 120 Songbird UAVs, 4 Panzerhaubitze 2000 self-propelled artillery systems, 7 spare barrels for the M109 howitzers, 47 FFG MRAPs, 8 Caracal air assault vehicles, 1 TRMLD for the air surveillance radar, 2 bridge-laying tanks Biber, 3 recent 1MC mine-clearing tanks, 3 mine plows, 6 Oshkosh M1070 tank transporters, 11 border protection vehicles. I'm nearly finished, don't worry. 41,155 shells, ammunition for the Marder 103 IFVs, 8,000 rounds of 40mm ammunition for the automatic grenade launchers, 74,000 rounds of ammunition for the HLR 338, which is a long-range precision rifle, 100,000 rounds of small arms ammo, 55,000 tourniquets, and 100,000 chest seals. Pretty long list. Germany also pledged to deliver another 75 Vector UAVs, 43 Songbird UAVs, and 30 tracked and remote-controlled infantry vehicles, Gerion RCS. And last but not least, a German delegation, including the German ambassador to Ukraine, Martin Jäger, visited the 10th separate operative response detachment Dozor of the Ukrainian border guards on Thursday and handed over an unspecified double-digit number of armored Toyota Land Cruiser 300 SUVs and Kawasaki buggies, which you see in the image right there. And yeah, that's it for my segment. Back to you, Joseph.
Thank you, sir. So I think we have maybe like 2 little things to talk about, and then we'll get to Q&A stuff. So the first one I think is just about the missile stuff. I wasn't paying enough attention at the time, but I know that there was some a lot of discussion among the Tochnyi staff about this recent missile test Russia did. All I do during the headlines section is kind of just cover all the mainstream media reporting about it. So what I can say is that pretty much exclusively every major mainstream media organization that I'm aware of reported it as a ICBM. But I think that's like inaccurate based on like our resident missile expert. I know John Ridge corrected it and said it's an IRBM. I don't know what the distinction would be. But then I think Erlend also might have some other information about this. So Erlend, as I mentioned, like the mainstream coverage was pretty concrete and clear, but I'm not sure it was accurate. So could you maybe clarify anything that maybe you want to clarify?
I mean, it was accurate because he referenced the person that said the statement. So in that sense, it wasn't inaccurate. But as far as we've seen, and I know that John Ridge has been following this, and I think Daniel has been looking a little bit at it as well. It's not an ICBM. It has a different classification, and this is a definitions, question or debate. In the end, it's not that important. What is important is that it's something Russia has never fired before in a war, or no one has fired before in a war, and it's obviously a political statement. This is Russia posturing itself, saying that these are red lines, look at us, and basically trying to threaten the West to not allow Ukraine to fire long-range missiles into Russia, which they have said over and over again is a red line, and that they will nuke whatever if Ukraine does this, which is
and if I understand the significance of the threat, Erlend, it's that these IRBM or this particular missile, we'll just call it that, could be used. It has range to fire like into Europe. Is that kind of the point?
I think it has range to fire all of Europe, yes, and that is kind of the threat here. Yeah, and we don't really have that many means that can theoretically intercept the missile, although I think there are possible means around. It's not just something that is highly available. So that's the threat. Look at what we can do. We made it rain down on Dnipro, and Ukrainians had no way of intercepting it, and we can put it in nuke on this thing as well. And you have very little warning time to take cover or anything. So that's kind of the threat here. In the end, it's just empty threats, in my opinion, just like they always do. The Russians doesn't want a nuclear war. They have their sons and daughters all around Europe, in Paris, London. They're not going to send nukes on London or Paris.
Yeah, and also, as far as I remember, John mentioning that it's like coming back to me in like fits and starts, was that this is a missile they converted from another stock of missile. They don't basically Putin said they're going to mass produce this thing. That doesn't seem likely based on like what this missile is. Is that accurate?
It would be very, very costly for their industry. That's kind of what I've understood.
Yeah, so I think that those are probably two good points, is that it's not really an intercontinental ballistic missile, but I think that for the most part, the media got correct that this is like a threat to Europe, basically. I think that's what Erlend said is all correct. And then
it's a definition question. And I think that in the end, the analysis about what this is, which is a threat against Europe and the US in some way to basically constrain Ukraine to not be able to fire these long-range missiles, that is the question here. It's not so much about the technology, in my opinion.
Agree. Yeah. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about was this cable line stuff. So I think most people know, right? A lot of our communications infrastructure is a lot of undersea cables. It's since the 20th century, it's been an important aspect of how we communicate. And in wartime, it's not infrequent. So going back to World War I, to like use specialized tools to destroy those cables. So it's not like crazy to insinuate that this could be happening. But as far as I understand, so there were a lot of reports this week that 2 cables in Europe got cut. As far as I understand, there were no significant disruptions to internet traffic, and there was a lot of accusations flying around. The ships, usually when these incidents happen, are Chinese, which is just kind of, I don't know if I'm maybe generalizing there, but I've noticed that in the media reports. As far as I understand, at least one of the ships was Chinese. And there I saw, again, this is just me looking on Twitter. I think Twitter's a terrible place to learn things because you can maybe get some early information, but if you don't know how to put it in context and separate it from noise, it's not very useful. But in this case, they showed pictures of like a Chinese ship with like a weird looking anchor. And they basically were like, 2 naval experts say this is a weird ship with a weird anchor. And so the implication being, of course, that there might be overt acts of sabotage. I don't have enough of a baseline to know 2 cables in short succession, if that's a big deal, and blah, blah, blah. It feels to me like this could be very much an either way thing for me. I didn't look too much into it, so I was just curious. Does anyone have maybe a hotter take on this? Have they looked into it more? Is there a pretty serious case to be made that this in some way relates to Russia's sabotage efforts, which are in fact happening in Europe? Or it feels to me like people were talking about it a lot on Twitter and a little bit in the mainstream media, and then the missile incident happened, and then everyone started talking about that, and I haven't really heard about it since then. So I'm just curious if you guys had any extra information about it. I chose not to kind of include it in the reports for that reason.
I don't have any extra information from what has been published basically by Danish news, which has been kind of the largest mainstream media that has been publishing stuff about this, because the Danish Coast Guard seems to have basically stopped this vessel between Denmark and Sweden. I haven't seen anything more about what the results of that has been, and I would say just in anticipation of news about what the results of an eventual boarding of that vessel has been. I kind of feel like not much is going to happen, unfortunately.
As far as I know, because there are a few Germans who actually cover this and tweet about this a lot or post about it a lot on Blue Sky. The last thing I read was from today. I believe the ship is already sailing again, and it's getting constantly accompanied by a Danish vessel, a German patrol boat, and I believe a third country is also involved in this. Escorted was the word I'm searching for. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so it sounds like we haven't heard any solid information that it's definitely not some kind of a sabotage activity going on by some state actor, but we also haven't heard anything that confirms it. So we're kind of waiting for more information to come in for anything serious, right?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is if the Danish authorities will release some information about what they eventually found, if they boarded the vessel or not, which is not certain.
And the Russians, I just want to say, the Russians are also now involved in this. I believe in a tweet I saw yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday. I don't know if you noticed it, but their Russian chip is now also like monitoring the situation. Missile corvette, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not sure though if the vessel is there because of this, because this might be a coincidence, but yeah, it was apparently coming back from Syria, so we'll see.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a case where like a lot of stuff could just be a bunch of random stuff lining up, and like it's certainly not outside of Russia's wheelhouse. Russia is we have confirmation from intelligence agencies in Europe and the United States that Russia has an active program in their own foreign intelligence agencies to conduct acts of just overt sabotage in Europe and the United States. So this wouldn't be like crazy for them to do. But at the same time, we try to give you guys like solid evidence that things are happening versus just kind of rumors or kind of going crazy before we know anything. So hopefully that was a good summary or a good elaboration. It's mainly stuff I was going to include in the news report, but I was like, I don't really know enough about it to really talk about it, so I just kind of glossed over it. So I'm glad you guys were there to provide a little more context. So I see you pulled up, I believe this is Daniela's new article. Is that correct, Mr. Erlend?
No, it's not really Daniela's article. But it's an article, and it's the latest article we posted. It's an in-depth study, I would say, of the current Russian logistic system. So this article is basically describing and giving an introduction to what happened and how the Russian logistics units are structured after the reforms that started around 2010, where the Russians tried to get these restructured, more emphasize on a lot more efficiency. And we have been looking at a lot of different information from Russian sources and other places that we could draw a pretty good picture of how the structures of these logistics units are. So you find quite a lot of ORBAT material here. Working on the translation for this that will be added as a separate download. But it's actually very difficult to translate all this stuff because so many acronyms and things. But yeah, this is it's a very interesting article for those that are interested in learning more about how the Russian logistics system works, which has shown to be very resilient, more than we would expect. So that is that article, and I think it's worth a look.
Yeah, so people should head down to Tochnyi.info and check out all the great articles there. We have a lot of great authors. I guess like Erlend. Go ahead.
I just want to say also that there is an upcoming article which I'm very, very happy that we will be able to present soon, which is about the Ukrainian effort to intercept ISR drones with FPV drones, and it's a very, very comprehensive article about this subject of one of the people that have been tracking this in the basement. So that's cool.
Dare I say air-on-air combat?
I would say interceptions. I think that air-on-air combat is when two drones of the same kind of category is just meeting and then bump into each other. That's kind of the air-to-air combat.
I'm like in my little office at Tochnyi, on the Tochnyi server, and once in a while I hear the people, usually from the basement, say like air-on-air combat, or so I was curious if it was the same thing, but it sounds like no.
No, the FPV drones that are taking down these surveillance drones are doing a very specific thing, and it's an interception. That's what it is.
I got you. Yeah, these surveillance drones fly like pretty high up, and they're difficult to take down, right? So it requires, as far as I understand, a pretty specialized ability to do that. Is that accurate?
Yep. They fly very high and also are very much more exposed for electronic warfare because they are basically visible for everyone that are in range. While when you're in the terrain, you will both have the challenges of the terrain, but also have the cover of the terrain. They are very specialized. They cost a little bit more, but the benefit of being able to take down these drones is just very, very high. And also we've seen that the Russians are struggling to get as much ISR coverage of the front lines as they had before, which was a huge problem. And we've seen a huge drop in Lancet attacks. And the assumption is that they basically don't have coverage, the coverage they need to use the Lancets, and that's very good. And also that means that they might not be able to do as good targeting for artillery, for rocket artillery, and for ballistic missiles, which has been a very big problem the last year, because the Russians have been flying a lot of ISR drones.
Yeah, I mean, if they, that's how a lot of these targets are found and chosen, right? Are these reconnaissance drones? It's obviously a lot safer to use a drone than a person to mark an asset. There's other ways to get it, right? All of these weapon systems are pretty agnostic. You give them coordinates, but this has been a really significant way the Russians are getting those coordinates. So to have Ukraine able to take down a lot of these reconnaissance drones is a really big deal, as Erlend said. So. Yeah, good news. We'll be interested to read about that report. I did want to ask you about the logistics thing. Is there any kind of story you can tell with that? Like, in other words, there was a pretty significant reformation, I would say, of the Russian military after the invasion of Georgia in 2008. I don't remember exactly when this reform started, but the idea was like, oh, the Russian military is going to be kind of leaner and like be able to bring firepower down where they need and blah, blah, blah. I imagine like logistics was a big part of that. So is the article about those reforms and kind of how they've been implemented, or is it more about how they're adapting to the war itself? Or
the article itself is basically a description of how the logistic units are right now. We did have an article before about also the logistics system and storage facilities, which is a separate thing. This is just about the units itself, which are, of course, related to the structures, the physical structures. Yeah, and it's basically just a description of how they are structured right now. Having a study of how it was before, I think, would be a little bit too much to deal with right now. But yeah, they did cut a lot. They did, but for the better for them, because they had a lot of dead meat and structures that, skeleton battalions and all that kind of stuff. Where basically on paper there was a brigade, but it wasn't really there. So they've been doing a lot of reforms to make the system more efficient. And before I can, I can't really talk to the efficiency of each unit or anything like this. But as we see, they managed to keep the machinery running, which makes me believe that these reforms have at least contributed in a positive way for the Russian armed forces.
Yeah, that makes sense. It also, I remember, like, especially towards the beginning of the war, like the number of military trucks the Russian military was losing was like insane. And at that time, I think that was really one of the serious problems they were having. I imagine it's still an issue, but I think, as you said, like they managed to keep their military logistics going, I think, longer than, and suffer a level of attrition that I think most militaries would have looked at and said, like, that can't be sustainable, or that's not sustainable. So I don't know. It's interesting. It sounds like, so it's pretty much a more descriptive article about the makeup of the Russian logistics units and how they work. And then I would say maybe the article itself doesn't have a thesis, but I think we can infer from just the continued operation of Russian logistics at all, considering the state of things, that it works, or it's as you said, it's resilient in some way. So yeah.
It's basically an article that can be used for people who want to learn more about how the Russian army is structured and in this specific subject. It's about the logistics units, which hasn't been really, published in English language anywhere before. So that's kind of why this article was written. And we have some people that have been working on this, kind of a byproduct of other work that they've been doing, but found out that this should be also summed up in article form. And I think also the Orbats is kind of what a military analyst would have would look at as very handy to be able to just download from the website, and that's fine.
Maybe one last question for you, Erlend. I apologize for putting you in the role of explaining the article or explaining Russian logistics, but I feel like we're visiting here. We might as well get our fill. So I would say that the sort of general attitude or the general impression is that Russian logistics is very like train heavy and train dependent. In other words, if the Russians have like a good like railhead with like a lot of like depots and stuff, and they have the infrastructure in place to do like serious train logistics, they're going to be fine. But anytime they kind of wander too far from the train depots, they're kind of in trouble. Like, do you think that based on your like reading of that article and kind of all that stuff, do you think that's accurate, or do you think that that's maybe a oversimplification of Russian logistics?
Yeah, I would say it's an oversimplification, not because of what I learned from helping out with this article, but because of looking at what the Russians have been doing since 2022. There's been a number of times where trains haven't really been available for frontline deliveries, like until the Russians managed to actually build a new train line in between Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia. That part of land had not really been supplied by train for the most part, and it was certainly not something that a deal breaker for the Russians. Let's say that. But I've heard this over and over again. The Russians are going to have problems because they don't have trucks. They need to use trains, blah, blah, blah. But eventually, we haven't seen any problems on the Russian side because of this. So I can imagine for a logistics officer in Russia, he would hammer me and say like, "Oh my God, you have no idea how much trouble we have." But they sorted it out. So yeah. It's kind of one of those things I feel has been inflated as a concept, like the tires that are rotting in Siberia, and Russians don't know how to do truck logistics. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
I don't know.
agree with you.
I don't know really why this has been such a big thing.
I think it's this kind of constant, because I think everyone can see things aren't going right eventually, and like there's kind of this refusal to acknowledge reality by the Russian side. In other words, like the Russian military can't actually end the war. They can't just go to Putin and say we can't win, we want to go home. They're locked in, and they basically have to lie. And when Putin asks, I assume they go, the war's going great, or at least there's like, we're doing it, we're working. So the point is like, the wheels have to come off at some point. And I think everyone's wondering, is like, that'll be the thing, right? This thing or that thing. And there's this constant like effort to be like, well, this will be the Achilles heel that like makes the wheels come off this crazy enterprise and, kind of derails the whole thing. But I think, the reality is just more complicated than that. And I think, as you said, there's been a lot of attributions of things that, the Russian economy will collapse by now. The Russian logistics will collapse by now. The Russian soldiers will mutiny by now. And I think it's good to have a more like sober-eyed reading of all this to say, it definitely matters. We're not suggesting it doesn't matter, but it's maybe a fool's errand to look at that stuff and be like, that's going to be the thing that kind of ends this, or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think you're right there, and these kind of issues might be one of the contributing factors to Russia having problems in the war generally. And maybe if Ukraine can resist and continue the fight for another year, maybe all of these issues will be adding up as too much to handle for the Russian military. But until that happens, saying that this is going to end the Russian military because they don't have trucks left has ended up as a not good take. And it's been a lot of these, and I'm probably guilty of saying some of these kind of hot takes myself, but I think, I don't think this is going to be the crushing hand, even though I would be very positively surprised if suddenly they don't have more trucks and no more ammo is going to arrive at the front lines. But yeah, we have not seen any signs of that. I see a lot of videos of trucks being blown up all the time, and been breaking down some videos where there's a lot of trucks. So they certainly have trucks to pull from their magazines still.
Yeah. Unless we have anything else on this topic, but I think thanks, Erlend, for showing that off. I think it sounds like an interesting article if people are curious. I think Erlend's right that you can probably find this in some dusty military manual somewhere, on probably deep in the bowels of the internet. But it's, as far as just making it available for a general audience, it's probably not that easy to find technical information about Russian logistics units. So I would say give that a read if that sounds like your cup of tea. Check it out at Tochnyi.info. We have a lot of great articles there, as Erlend mentioned. Anything else you want to add about this, Erlend?
Well, I just wanted to mention that, this kind of is complementary to the article of the logistics system of Russia storage facilities, which is also been scraping a lot of information from manuals, from general OSINT observations, it's a complementary article. So maybe start off with this one if you're interested, because those two are related in some way. Thanks for bringing that to the audience's attention, Erlend. I think we're going to maybe move towards Q&A. If anyone has any questions in the chat, I think last week we said we were going to get back to the questions, but I think we lost them. So sorry about that. If you have a question from any time, or just a general question, feel free to ask. I had one other topic I was going to bring up. I did read through all the questions, and they were all for Mirko. So that's like,
we have to get back on. That's what that means.
Yeah. So
one thing why we maybe wait for a couple of questions. I just want to get into one thing which you mentioned in the chat, Joseph, when you talked about the German Ringtausch stuff. You said, another tank for the Ukrainian logistical and mechanics. No, I just want to mention that I do agree, it's another tank. But first of all, as far as I know, it's based on the T-72. So I don't think the Ukrainians have a lot of trouble working with the tank. And apart from that, you have to think, apart, of course, that it's a huge deal for the German industry. I mean, that's possibly a €1 billion deal, right? But apart from that, for the Ukrainians to get 30 tanks, 30 IFVs, and a big spare parts package and this big ammunition package for the already existing IFVs, because Ukraine already operates these kinds of IFVs, and you get that within 8 weeks to Ukraine. And I think that's of course, it's not the modern one, right? It's not a new Leopard 2A6 or 2A4 or whatever, but it's still 30 tanks, 30 IVs, a lot of spare parts, and a lot of ammunition within 8 weeks to Ukraine. And I think that's still a good deal, though.
No, you're absolutely right.
I just want to mention that.
You're totally right. I was just kidding around. I agree with you. Number one, every piece of military equipment helps. It's obviously helpful to have everything streamlined and standardized. And I certainly don't envy. I guess for me, I say that just because I feel so bad for the Ukrainian logisticians. We're talking about logistics, I guess, this week, who are tasked with maintaining just such an insane array of equipment. I mean, we're talking everything. I couldn't even name to you the sources of all this military equipment, but it must be a trip to really have to keep all this stuff up. But as you said, like, it's not only is it, all tanks are good, but this was a package that seemed pretty comprehensive. As you said, they sent spare parts with it. They sent ammunition with it. I don't know. So you said they're operating that IFV, because that IFV is kind of a unique thing as far as I understand.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, because this
It's
news
not
is
like Yugoslav stuff. This is from like Soviet,
Yeah.
or not Soviet, communist Yugoslavia. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries, because I was researching about this like a month ago, because it's, it happened at the end of October that the letter of intent was actually signed. If I recall correctly, the Slovenians have delivered a couple of these IFVs. I might be mistaken, but I think the Slovenians have delivered a couple of them already to Ukraine, like in 2022 or so.
Yeah, that makes sense, because all the former Yugoslav countries have this stuff. So it seems like more of this would probably benefit Ukraine, because there's probably a lot of this stuff laying around to some degree, and if we can get more ringtausches going, it's probably not a bad thing, right?
I mean, it depends, right? Like, I wouldn't want to have another ringtausch like we did with Greece, for example, anymore. That's like completely outdated, and that shouldn't be happening anymore. But there are some ringtauschs, like for example the one with Croatia, where I have no issues at all. Like, we give Croatia like 144 million, and they deliver 30 tanks, 30 IVs, spare parts, and ammunition to Ukraine within 8 weeks, and they buy German stuff with it. I think that's a perfect ringtausch, to be honest. Although you could, of course, argue that these 144 million could be invested in some better things, but I think you can nowhere else buy 30 tanks and 30 IVs within 8 weeks, right? Like, of course, you can buy stuff for Ukraine, but it might take half a year, or whatever, to produce and then deliver to Ukraine. Yeah, it depends.
Hey, Gao, we got a question.
Oh no. What is it?
Kellen asks, do you know when in 2025 Germany will deliver 400 pledged MRAPs that was delayed by US permits? Separately, can Germany produce PAC-3 interceptors for Ukraine if US stops aid?
Okay, first question. So I need to watch out not to say too much. So the plan internally was to deliver a 120 or 140 MREPs this year. Publicly, they said they would deliver 400. I don't know why they go public and say they're going to deliver 400 when their internal documents say they only deliver 120 or 140. I don't know. If deliveries are now continuing like we did last month, or this month, I believe we're now at 73. I think we will have no issues to get to 100 this month. Deliveries should, of course, increase by time, because they just started a couple of months ago, and then, of course, production capacity is getting increased and all that kind of stuff. So I think we will have no issues to actually complete the deliveries in 2025, but I think it will take the whole year, to be honest. Like, when we see that we need to deliver 300 MREPs over the whole year, when I think you need the whole year to actually do that, or at least quarter of a year. So there's no specific date when they can reach it or whatever. It's I think it will take the whole year. And for the PAC-3 interceptors, Germany is going. I believe they had made the first construction step like this week or last week in Germany. Where is it? Schönhausen or so. But that will take time. That takes years. So I believe we covered this topic earlier, like a couple of months ago already. The construction line in Germany is no option for Ukraine in the short term. That's an option for Ukraine in years ahead, but not now, not next year, and I don't even think in 2026, to be honest. I don't know if you have a different opinion, Erlend.
I mean, also, this is a US weapons license, so any export to the Ukraine would have to be approved by the US. So I don't see the difference from just buying it from the US industry at this point. So next question. No, that was the wrong one. And that was the same
Yeah.
one. Sorry about that. Tiri asks, just a little question. Do you know if the IRBM did some notable destruction with those 36 little submunitions? So just a little about that. And what I want to say about that is that the emergency services of Dnipro, I think they stated there were 2 civilian casualties, but they were minor, not too bad injuries, so they are being treated in hospital, or I think only one actually needed treatment in hospital. But if there were any military casualties, they wouldn't have stated that in the official reports. However, the target seems to be Pidmash, and that's been identified by people who do geolocations, but it's not necessarily so Pidmash is this big industrial complex in Dnipro, which also is connected. They do heavily contributions to the military, but it doesn't seem like the hit was very precise from those geolocations. But we don't know because there's no public information about the damage. So that's what I know about this topic. And then a friend I know very well asks, do you know anything about Alexander Darchev, the newly Russian appointed ambassador in the US? This would be for Joseph, since he is American.
Yeah, so I know very little. I just read very cursorily about this, that he used to be the ambassador to Canada for several years. He seems like a pretty experienced guy. Like he's spent his career in North America. He probably knows like his audience pretty well, I would say. And then I would, this is, so I would say that's like what we know about him, is that he is a pretty consummate technocrat for the job. Like I would say that is my like concrete analysis. And then my speculation is, based on his career and like based on just a few statements I read from him about Canada, he spent most of his career in Canada. Like, as people probably know, there's a large Ukrainian diaspora in Canada. And although it hasn't seemed to be able to overcome the Ukrainian budgetary or the Canadian budgetary recalcitrance towards anything military, it does have a pretty significant political impact in Canadian foreign policy. So as a result, they've been pretty strong about, like, the 2014 invasion of Ukraine into Donbass, like really caused problems with Canada, I'll put it that way. And his job for the last 7 years or whatever was to like try to repair that relationship, get things back to normal. So again, me speculating, don't know for sure, but I would argue that this is maybe a signal that Putin is trying to put forward some kind of ability to make the U.S. a more neutral party in all this, and offer reconciliation is a strong word. But what they are going to call an attempt to reconcile things, right? They're trying. I would say they're trying to send someone who is able to like tell Washington, this is no big deal. You guys just got to calm down. Ukraine's just got to accept these separatists and blah, blah, blah. Like, all that. That's what he's been doing in Canada. So I would guess that they picked that guy because they think he would be good at doing that in America. So again, me speculating, don't know what his actual post will look like, or what he might be a nobody that no one cares about, right? So maybe it doesn't matter, but it sounds like a pretty important job. I would assume that they picked very carefully who they were going to send, and it seems to me like there's a much more aggressive. It seems like Russia's acting much more aggressively towards Europe lately, right? It seems like the threats are going towards Europe more than the U.S. So maybe there's some effort there to again, keep the U.S. like more on a neutral footing in the future. But I don't know. That's just my speculation. Do you guys have any thoughts about this guy? Do you know anything about him?
Not at all.
Yeah, no clue. Well, I have one more thing before we close. A friend of mine and also collaborator of Andrew has published a very nice guide to the different glide bombs, and it's in an article at Offbeat, and it's emphasized a lot on visual aids. So he's been doing a lot of 3D modeling and mock-ups of the different glide bombs, and yeah, I highly recommend this article. It's a very interesting read. So it's all the glide bombs that are being used in Ukraine.
Yeah, that's impressive that he even modeled them.
Yep.
Yeah, these are really significant, I would say, tools, especially for Russia. They're able to like hit with really heavy ordnance parts of the battlefield they wouldn't be able to otherwise hit, and it causes huge problems for Ukraine in their defensive positions. Would you say that's like an accurate?
Yep. It's one of the most significant problems for Ukraine. That's why we've been hearing so much about this need for long-range air defenses and better radars for fighter jets that Ukraine received from the West, so that they could basically put up a shield against these bombs, not targeting the bombs itself, but the fighter bombers that are dropping them. Yeah, it's a very big problem. And but Ukraine is also using guided glide bombs, so it's a problem for both sides.
Yeah, so check it out. It's on at what website, Erlend?
It's on Offbeat, but I put the link in the video description.
Okay, good. Yeah, so do we have any other cues we should A?
There was I just died, sorry. There was one man. Whew. Yeah, there was one from Thierry. I didn't die because of the question, so don't feel bad. Has Germany a production of guided HIMARS ammo that could replace those from RTX? I don't think Germany produces any ammunition for the HIMARS or for MLRS like the M2070 or the German variant, the Mars 2. There's a lot of not speculations, thinking and negotiation going on right now because of the replacement of the 5 Mars 2 systems we gave to Ukraine, because Germany wants to acquire not HIMARS or again M2070 or something. We want to acquire Europulse, and it's not clear right now if we can actually integrate our ammunition with them because it needs US approval, and I don't think the US will be happy that we are not buying their system. Though there's a lot of confusion and speculation going on about ammunition and all that kind of stuff, but I don't think we produce any of that, except for, if I recall correctly, there was we contracted them to produce new 82 rockets, but they're not guided missiles. These are the ones which we delivered to Ukraine, a couple of hundred of them. I believe like 500 or so we delivered to Ukraine, and they have anti-tank mines included in the rocket, and then so you can basically remote mine a field or so with these rockets. Yeah, but that's all. Sorry, I don't think that was a very good answer, to be honest.
And my friend Astro Abacus can go and peel potatoes. Because this is not serious.
Yeah, this is definitely a case where Ukraine needed a really long range capability, because they launched these things from planes like far away, right? Erlend,
Yeah, this is an unserious question from my friend that knows better, and he can go and peel potatoes.
I think that was very serious. That actually reminds me of the stuff Elon Musk tweeted today. Have you seen that?
I blocked Elon Musk.
Yeah. So for those who haven't seen it, I had to laugh. For those who haven't seen it, I believe he made a tweet like he was quoting a video of these like drone swarms from China, right? And he basically laughed about the US still producing manned F-35 jets when we have drones. And I'm like, dude, you really want to tell me that you want to replace like F-35s or any other jets with drones who have not as near as the possible payload capacity or the range or whatever else? It's, I don't know. And that dude is serious. He is like literally serious with that.
I don't know, man.
Erlend, real quick, I had a question for you. In my report, I mentioned very briefly about that Russian guy who was detained in Norway for spying. But
Yep.
they're really like the report was literally in English, like 3 sentences. It was like they detained some guy. I vaguely remember they said he had one identity, that was like a ruse, and then it was like he was really Russian, something like that. But beyond that, like, I don't know, was there anything you would say in the local language press that like didn't translate over to the little bulletins that they got?
Well, long story short, the guy was working as a security guard. Not sure to what capacity though, from a private company that the U.S. Embassy had probably contracted, and his lawyer has stated that he admitted that he was giving information about people that were coming and going at the U.S. Embassy, for instance, to the Russian or to Russians and Iranians. That probably means intelligence operators that are in covert, like cultural attaches or some BS at their embassies here. I suspect that the way they found them was found out this was that our internal security services are monitoring the employees at the embassy that they suspect are working for the SVR or GUR, sorry, GRU, and the same with the Iranian embassy, basically. So this guy seems like an amateur that has been uncovered quite easily, and is trying to admit to something. We don't know though if that is everything, of course. So we'll see. Doesn't seem too serious of an incident. We had a lot more serious incidents in the past.
Right. It's just for my own amusement. I was trying to you mentioned that his lawyer kind of brought in. Was it clear, like, did he go to the lawyer and he was just casually saying, like, look, this is what I'm doing, and the lawyer was like, oh my God, I'm not getting caught up in this, and went and reported it? Or is it more that like the guy went to the lawyer and said, like, I'm going to kind of surrender based on the fact that I know I'm caught? Or like, what, was the lawyer? I just feel like there's like a regular Norwegian lawyer that got caught up in this. So I'm just curious about
no. So he is arrested, and his lawyer has stated to the press that he has admitted to certain things. Yes. So
I got you. Yeah. He's the guy who got sent to the jail cell after he was arrested. Okay, I understand now.
Yeah. And his lawyer is a very notable Norwegian lawyer, probably doing it pro bono.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, in a lot of these cases, you get that where it's it's just good advertising. And I'll be honest, I don't care if they have a good representation. Like lawyers exist to make sure the laws are followed and stuff. Like the guy should have whatever rights he's afforded.
Even if he's a traitor and everything, that he has a good lawyer, one of the top lawyers, is very important, because if he is convicted, that means no one can say like, yeah, he had a shitty defense and that was the reason.
Exactly.
It's very important. We had the same thing with the Breivik when he was sentenced here. Very, very good lawyer represented him, and no one has had any problems with that lawyer being his legal defense at all. That's how it should be in a democracy where there is proper a proper justice system that is independent.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a sign of a free society, as you said. So I think we got a couple more questions. We can probably wrap up, eh?
Yep. I'm just gonna avoid the troll Astro Abakusa.
North Korea stuff.
Have there been any updates on South Korean officers? Offer to send advisors to Ukraine to aid with the defense against North Korean troops in Kursk? What I've seen is that there's been statements about South Korea sending observers and also maybe some translators in case of POWs being captured. Haven't seen any more specific information about advisors. I think this is mainly that the South Koreans wants to study this, which makes sense.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything this week beyond what I mentioned in the report. I want to say like a South Korean, I forget exactly what I put in the report this week, but there was sort of some updates on like what the North Koreans are doing. You know, what, two weeks ago or last week, I think 2 weeks ago, there was a series of like high profile meetings between like basically all the governments met with their armies and talked about this. Some of the armies met with each other and talked about this. Some of the governments met with each other, yada yada. So everyone's talked about it. I would say that it's a pretty strong signal that like Ukraine was given this permission to strike after this all happened. In other words, I don't want to say that for sure that's a direct result, but it seems like we're going to see maybe a stiffer diplomatic stance, you know, in some of the capitals as a result of all these meetings. But as far as like, especially South Korea doing concrete things as a response to what North Korea is doing, I haven't seen any update this week. This week has been, as far as I've read, like updates on what North Korea is doing, and what they're doing is like they're getting stuff from Russia and they're deploying their troops in combat for sure. Like everyone's confirmed that now, basically. For some reason, the US was lagging on that. Ukraine and South Korea confirmed that like last week or 2 weeks ago, and the US confirmed that this week. There are like, there's been a lot of rumors on the Ukrainian side that they've hit facilities and killed a bunch of North Koreans, but I haven't seen any confirmation of that. Erlend, are you aware of any incidents where they've actually hit like a facility with a bunch of North Koreans in it? That's like a rumor on every telegram about every strike these days.
Yeah, so there was of course a notable Storm Shadow or Scalp EG strike in Kursk, where it looks like from the video, and that's been kind of geolocated and confirmed, that they hit underground facilities with bunker buster cruise missiles, the Storm Shadows. And there's been some reports from, well, most of them is referring to this Dosia Spiona Telegram account, which is supposedly, it's supposed to be inside information from the FSB, but I think that should be taken with a grain of salt. Although this account has been giving out some early news that have been confirmed to be correct in the past. This account claimed that a North Korean general was severely injured in the attack. So that's one. And then there's been an attack and strike where there's no BDA, no confirmation of that or anything like this, where there are rumors about North Korean soldiers being casualties in this strike, both in Kursk.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's not unlikely that they've probably hit some significant targets that have North Koreans like occupying the area. So I would say that's seems true that in 2 cases it's probably correct. So yeah, I think that's like the North Korea update, right? They're doing stuff. They're involved. They're definitely involved. They're getting hit in strikes, and governments have had a bunch of serious meetings about it. It does seem to have reflected a little bit the diplomatic stance about what's going on in Ukraine. But it's Western governments we're talking about. They're not going to grow a spine overnight. So anything else you want to say, Erlend?
No, just because we're on the Scalp and Storm Shadow topic, Mark is asking, are you following the Scalp use, listening now that the UK has loosened Storm Shadow? I think that permission was given to Ukraine at the same time, and that the French just used a different occasion where they announced this, because probably it was more convenient for them to have this news at a different occasion. I think the Minister of Foreign Affairs was speaking at some event, and then he said that we're giving more, another batch of a dozen, so 12 more Scalp EG, and that they will be that they have given the permission to Ukraine to strike in Russia with them. That being said, there is no way we can see or identify from any footage if there was a Scalp EG or a Storm Shadow. The missiles are almost the same, and yeah, we don't know if there were Scalp EGs or Storm Shadows or both in that strike in Kursk.
And I'll just say real quick, as far as I'm aware, like historically, the French are known to not really put a lot of restrictions on weapons use when they sell weapons or provide weapons. They kind of just hand them to you and say, go ahead, go nuts. They don't care historically. And I am certainly not a good source for this, but I also I don't know, I'll just say I've heard on the grapevine that when they gave them Scalp in the first place, that they basically didn't provide them, they just gave them Scalp, and compared to Storm Shadow, where they basically talk to the British when they have a target, and everything has to be, explained what's going on. The drawback is that there's a system on Scalp that makes it more resilient to EW that their French aren't comfortable giving because there's no restrictions. So it's two different approaches or attitudes towards military assistance. On one, you have a more active oversight of what's going on, and that also allows maybe some more allowance for giving them better stuff because there's not as much fear just handing them the keys, right? And then you have the more French attitude, which is just hand them the stuff, but then you're a little more hesitant to give them the good equipment. So as far as I know, there isn't much to loosen on Scalp really, but maybe I'm mistaken about that. Erlend, should I stop talking now?
Yeah, I think not an answer is also an answer, right?
I was talking to a muted mic, sorry. So it's been pretty well established, and even though there's been a lot of misinformation in mainstream media about this, that the restrictions on long-range strikes into Russia with Western provided missiles has been purely a US restriction, and that the Brits and the French have more or less given their permission to Ukraine to do this with their weapons on many different occasions, but that the US have been basically threatening Ukraine to not use any of the French or UK provided missiles, even though they could technically. And Zelensky said in an interview that he cannot risk losing all the aid, and that has been basically what the US have been saying to Ukraine, that if you do this, then even if it's not up to us to give the permission for the specific missiles, we will stop aid to Ukraine because this is an escalation, blah, 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 all this stuff. So, yeah, I don't think they've had any restrictions. I think this has been down to the White House changing their policy. And what I think is interesting is that the first time they do it, there's a target which is within range of other weapons that they have been previously allowed to use in Russia. So Gimlers, for instance, can reach this target from inside Ukraine. So, I mean, maybe this is a signaling from Ukraine to show the West or the US and Europe that we are responsible. We're not sending these missiles to Moscow, even if theoretically we could, because a lot of people might not know, but theoretically you can send a Storm Shadow missile well within range from inside Ukraine and hit the Kremlin. And I think that's kind of been one of the big scares of Western politicians.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, Erlend, about the U.S.'s kind of political attitude to the whole thing, and that's probably a much bigger factor. And so, as you said, it kind of gets confusing. It's a little, it's good to say, like, it's fair to say the restrictions on scalp, in theory, are sort of being lifted in a sense if we take that into account. So I think that's like a good, I don't know. I think both things are true, basically. Someone mentioned the presidential drawdown package from November 20th. I don't know how I missed this, so thank you so much to the person in chat who mentioned it. So I'll just mention very quickly. It includes HIMARS ammo, 155, 105, 81 millimeter, 60 millimeter, and then equipment for F-16s. I think that's maybe the one thing I would say is significant. And then there's just a bunch of little stuff, tube launched, tow missiles, javelins, anti-armor, unmanned aerial systems, chemical, biological, protection equipment, stuff like that. So it's about $275 million US. Again, like, just if this were a normal aid package, I'd be like, great. But we are in a situation where they've claimed that in the span of a month, they're going to, or I guess 2 months, I should say, they're going to provide billions of dollars of equipment. So 275 million is great, but it doesn't inspire confidence in me that they're going to be able to get all of that amount done in time. And again, I really hope they can. I really hope that they find a way to make sure all that money is used before January. So thanks for that question.
I think it's when you just pledge equipment worth, like, what is it, 250 million euros, something like that. It's more likely that actually most of it will end up in Ukraine by January than when you would now pledge a 2 billion aid assistance package,
Yeah, but more what I mean is, like, if, let's say, the amount you've got to reach is to get all that money spent is 4 billion, US dollars, then a 1 billion aid package going to Ukraine, I'd be like, okay, it sounds like if they do a couple more of these, then they could get it done. But if we're talking 275 million a week, right, that's not going to cut it in terms of getting the full amount to Ukraine. So, again, like, I'm not saying it's bad. Like, it's good. It's definitely good that Ukraine's getting military aid from the US. Don't get me wrong, but if you put it in the context of, they just made the claim that they're going to send billions of dollars worth of aid within the span of 8 weeks, and this is their weekly package, I'm kind of looking at that going, I don't know. So that's the one thing that gives me pause about it. But again, just my opinion.
Have I maybe, like, do I misinterpret this? Because I always was under the impression that the aid they said they're going to send to Ukraine until January, basically, or until the end of the year, isn't that not already pledged?
It's allocated to be spent by the president. It has to be, like, they have to put together the equipment and they have to send it to Ukraine, and the president has to sign off on it. It's presidential drawdown authority. The government gave the president that amount, that much authority in dollars to do things.
Yeah, I always thought that they actually did it already. Like, I thought that was related to this. The US only delivered like 10% of their promised aid. I thought that was related to that, and that's just the remaining, like, 80-90% or whatever.
I don't know. That's already pledged aid. Those 10% he was talking about, which was not correct. But no, they just made a statement that they will deliver all the aid in the that is left in the PDA.
Correct. Yeah. The DoD, the DoD and the president have said they're going to do that. It's like the old days, Maurice, where it's like the king is going to go fight a war and he's got to ask the parliament for money. That's kind of how this works, right? So, the parliament our Congress has given the president like X amount of dollars to do this thing, and he has to like go buy stuff with it, right? Or like so he goes to the military and says like, I want you to send this, I want you to send this. And the military to some extent says to him like, well, for us to have full military readiness, we can't send that. And not only as Erlend said, not only have they claimed that they will send all of the aid that they promised, but that they will do it while keeping U.S. stocks like sufficient, which again seems that's a really tall order to do in 2 months. So I'm just concerned. It's like saying that we're going to go to space in 2 months. It's like a massive logistical undertaking what they're talking about to send and replace billions of dollars worth of equipment in that span of time. But I really hope they do it. I wish them like the best of luck.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
So Aussie asked the question about this strike, and could the choice of missiles be related to the underground penetration capability? Yeah, definitely. When they chose this target, the missiles used were the right ones. They have significant bunker buster capability. But what I'm thinking is that when Ukraine, unfortunately, they don't have enough missiles to go after all the targets that they would like. So they will have to choose between a range of different targets. I'm kind of surprised that they went for this type of target and not, let's say, another ammo depot. And that's why I'm thinking that politically, it looks like Ukraine is a lot more responsible while basically going after people directly involved with the Kursk operation. I hope to see more large ammo depots being blown up within the 560 kilometer range that we can. Let's say if they fire them around here, I mean, they can reach quite a lot more than they could before. Yeah, no, let's not put it here, because in Crimea they've been launching stuff for a long time. So we'll see. Maybe they can blow up Putin's palace in Sochi as well.
Good luck. Godspeed, boys. So yeah, I think. Do we have any other stuff we want to hit on Q&A before we wrap up?
I think that's all. That looks like we went through all the questions this time.
Cool. So yeah, I hope you guys had a good time chat. I think we covered a lot of stuff today. There's a lot going on, actually. A lot of it is like meetings and talking, and I try to cut through all that with you guys and tell you like when things happen. But sometimes it's a little hard to distinguish when talking matters. So hopefully we were able to explain some stuff to you guys that, especially for me this week, it's always good to have the Tochnyi guys around just as a group, because like with these underground cables or like with this Norwegian spy, there's usually someone around who's looked at it in a little more depth. So you can be like, well, I heard about this, but what actually happened, right? Because usually Twitter or social media in general, or even mainstream media to a certain extent, or, whatever you want to call it, like established media organizations, they do their best, but they don't always have the full picture on the ground. So it's always good to have people who are, it's not just that you need to read about something happening. You need to know enough context to know like what's important, and know that like what's accurate and what's technically correct information. Otherwise, the whole thing could just be, everyone runs off with, bad information and starts talking. And then before you know it, the whole thing's just a big mess of noise. So I always am, proud to be associated with, and also to hang out with the guys at Tochnyi and gals. who just help us kind of sort through the noise, and hopefully you guys find that useful. So thanks so much to the panel, and thanks so much to, of course, our live audience. We appreciate you guys always coming in and asking really interesting questions. It really gives us a better understanding of what you guys are interested in and what you want to know more about. So as kind of Erlend was talking about today, one of our goals is to make some of this more technical information about things like Russian logistics and the units, the military units that do it, just more available to a general audience who I think increasingly need to know more about things like this because it's, the world's becoming a more dangerous place, and things that I think were once viewed as just technical information no one needed to know. Now we all need to know what HIMARS is, right? That's just kind of a normal thing. The news just assumes that everyone knows what HIMARS is usually because that's the world we live in now. So I appreciate the guys who do all of the difficult work to take that technical information and boil it down and synthesize it and make it accessible to a broader audience. I think that's really important work in a modern age where information is becoming more vital, but there's just so much more noise in the world, and it's difficult to sort that out. So I don't know. I'm really getting grandiose with all this these days. Thanks to our live audience. Thanks to our authors on the website. Thanks to our live panel, our little team here today. And thanks to everyone at Tochnyi who does all the production work to make it possible for us to talk to you guys. And thanks, of course, to people who watch the video on demand. We know everyone has a busy schedule. The last thing I'll say is tune in Wednesday at the same time. 2100 Kyiv is when we broadcast. We're going to have an interesting interview. We don't want to say more than that because, I don't know, in the history of things, sometimes things don't work out. But hopefully just keep an eye out for promotional material for that. And we'll see you Wednesday for an interview. Erlend, do you want to say anything about that?
No, that's what I want to say about that.
Yeah. So we're trying.
Thank you.
I've only been allowed to say so. If it were up to me, I'd just immediately blurt out everything. But more professional minds prevail, and I was careful. So yeah, tune in Wednesday, 2100 Kyiv time. I think I'll say this: keep an eye out for more stuff. We think Wednesday, 2100 Kyiv time, something's going to happen. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Also, yeah, check us out on Blue Sky. We've started there. I was like, Twitter, like that's where all the journalists are. I don't care. I'm not even that big on Twitter anymore, honestly. I care mostly about YouTube. But point is, there's a lot of activity on Blue Sky. Like we're getting followers at a rate, and obviously a lot of it's the migration from Twitter, but that in and of itself is significant. Like it's pretty interesting how quickly it's taking off. So I would just, tell people to maybe give it a look. Follow us on there if you want. We have something called a starter pack, which I believe German Aid to Ukraine arranged, which is great. It just like gives you a bunch of accounts you can follow that we think are like good, reliable sources to learn about Ukraine. So yeah, I think I don't know, if you liked the concept of Twitter but hated the new management direction, this might be something you might be interested in. But I totally understand if you're not interested in any of that stuff. You can always find us on YouTube. We're happy to give you our information there. But yeah, if you guys are interested in like some good sources about Ukraine and also maybe some updates from us outside of the YouTube verse, then you can check us out there. So I think we can wrap it up there. Again, I already thanked everyone. I won't do that again. We'll be here for another 20 minutes. So I'll close out with a good old Slava Ukraini.
Heroim Slava.